Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show here on the Texas Town Square Media Network. We appreciate you tuning in today as we take a little bit of a different approach to the show today as we remember the legendary Rush Limbaugh. We will visit with David Spiller, candidate for HD68, coming up here shortly. Our next guest, normally we stick to politics the entire time with our next guest, but this time I think it's a great pleasure to have on the Lieutenant Governor of our great state because he has some a really interesting history with Rush Limbaugh. And we welcome in Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Welcome back to the show. How are you this evening?
Well, Chad, like millions of Texans, cold. We were fortunate enough to have a generator in our home. We had lost our power for several days. Just got it back today. No water, no internet, no phone like everyone else. Wow. And so as we talked about Rush, I just want to let everyone know we are all doing all we can to get as much power restored as quickly as we can. And we will be conducting hearings beginning next week, 2 days of hearings in business and commerce, and another day of hearings the following week in jurisprudence to find out what happened, why it happened, and to do all we can so it never happens again. And we're going to get to the bottom of this, and there has to be accountability on what happened. We all know it's an historic weather event, Chad, but I just do not believe the power generators or ERCOT were as prepared as they should have been. So I just want to let people know this: we're all affected. We all take this very seriously, and we're going to do all we can to do all we can so that it never happens again.
Very good.
Now you want to talk to Rush about Rush. So Chad, here's my history with him. I bought this little radio station in Tomball, Texas, which is about 40 miles north of Houston, in June of '88. And I'm sitting there, and we had more cows than we had people listening. It was 40th ranked out of 40 radio stations. It was a brand new station, had been on the air for about a year, it had gone bankrupt, and we took it over. And I originally was going to do a business format, news format, sports format kind of combination. And about in the fall sometime, a guy named Rush Limbaugh called me on the telephone. And in those days, Chad, for people who don't remember, talk radio was dead. Back in the early and mid 80s, talk radio was about, ask your doctor, ask your lawyer, what did you do on your summer vacation? And general managers or program directors didn't want anyone talking about politics. Don't talk about God. Don't talk about anything controversial. Heaven forbid we offend someone. And so this guy, Rush, called me up and told me what his show was about. And I liked what I heard. I said, send me a tape. He did, and I listened to it. And I said, this guy is saying what I've been thinking, and I think lots of Texans and Americans are thinking. And at that time, Chad, and you know the radio business well, but your listeners may not know it as well, it's very hard to get a syndicated show on a radio station. I mean, why should a local radio station take off a local host or take away local revenue to put on some person from, on some satellite somewhere doing a radio show? And so Rush couldn't get on anywhere. And so in the city of Houston, for example, everyone had turned him down, like they turned him down everywhere. It wasn't content, it was just the business model no one thought made sense. Well, I had nothing to lose. He had nothing to lose. I mean, I didn't have any listeners, and he had nothing to lose. I mean, he didn't want to go on a 40th ranked station, but he wanted to get on the market. And so we were one of the first major markets to put him on. And we went from the 40th rank, and you know how hard this is, Chad. We went from the 40th ranked station from 11 to 1 to number 1 in about 90 days.
Wow.
And I didn't have any money to promote the show. It just caught on. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And of course, and more stations picked him up, and that happened all over America. And we had the Rush rooms where you go to when you were having lunch and listen to the show. And Rush and I became personal friends. He was a big Steeler fan. I was a big Oiler fan. And I'd go to Pittsburgh and join him to watch the games because I was still doing some sports then. He'd come to Houston for the Oiler games. In 1992, the Republican convention was held in Houston. He came and did his show for that week, and we spent a lot of time together. And everything I have, Chad, everything I have, I owe to Rush Limbaugh. For one thing, I had I was broke like a lot of people in the mid-'80s, and I bought this struggling radio station. And he helped me make it a success. I mean, we rode his coattails. And so he made my business a success. I still had this radio station 33 years later. I sold it and bought it back once. And Rush stayed with me for 12 years, and he was loyal to the core. When he became very popular, Chad, all the big stations in town suddenly said, "Oh, this guy's popular. Let's go get his show." And they made him great offers. And his owner of his show called me one day and said, "Dan, thanks for being there with us for the last several years, but we can get on a bigger station with a bigger signal. And we got to do what's right by Rush. We got to get him on the best station we can with the best signal." And so I called Rush that weekend. And I said, "Rush, because I'd invested some money to buy a new tower to strengthen our signal, et cetera, et cetera." I said, "Rush, I've been with you from day one when no one wanted you. You got to hang with me." And he said, "Let me see what I can do." And that following Monday, that same person who told me they were taking away the show in 90 days said, "Well, Rush said, we're going to stick with you." Rush stuck with the people who were with him in the beginning, and just a wonderful human being, a wonderful guy. But he built that radio station for me, in essence. Everyone, rode his coattails all around America, stations. He made AM radio what it is today, Chad. He made it possible for guys like you. And he made Sean Hannity by letting him fill in for him, for example, back in the 90s. And he was, for baseball fans, he was the Babe Ruth of AM radio. He saved AM radio. And so our station became a top station. I did a talk show as well on that station. I switched from sports to politics. And I say everything I owe, I owe to him, not only my success in my business, but because of the audience he built and the audience I built and the issues we talked about, because he and I thought alike, I was able to run for the Senate and win handily. I wouldn't be lieutenant governor today had I not gotten that call from Rush Limbaugh.
It's so interesting, just the ties between you two and how many people I've heard stories from who say that as nice of a guy as he was on the air, same guy off the air, that he was a nice guy, a genuine guy to be around.
Yeah, genuine. Let me tell you a quick funny. I don't know how much you're on time. Let me tell you a good story. So the Houston Oilers were playing the Kansas City. I think when he had gone to Kansas City, and so Rush calls and he said, "Hey, I'm coming in and I'm bringing a couple of my friends," because he used to work in Kansas City. He used to be the guy that would come out on the field before Kansas City Royal baseball games and give away things. I mean, that's what he was doing when he was in Kansas City before he went to Sacramento to start his radio talk career. And he said, "So I'm going to bring in George Brett, who played with Kansas City, a guy named Jamie Quirk who played." He said, "Set us a place up for dinner, and we'll come in, and then we'll go to the game the next day." I said, "Great, Rush." So my friend, a guy named Ed Hendy, owns one of the best steak places in America called the Taste of Texas. We set up a private room in the Taste of Texas for Rush. Because he was such a big star, we didn't want him to be besieged by people, and so he could eat his meal. So we had a room for about 30 people, and the owner brought everyone into that room who he knew, his pastor, his friends, his neighbors, so that, come in, meet Rush, but don't be a nuisance. So unbeknownst to us, George Brett, who was quite a character with the Royals, he had been out playing golf that day, and everyone he met, they said, "What are you doing in town?" He said, "I'm here with Rush Limbaugh. You want to come to dinner that night?" So when we got to the restaurant, the room was already filled because all of George Brett's friends had told the maitre d', "Hey, we're with Rush." So the room was full of all of these folks. The owner had to run all the other folks out to make room for Rush's friends, and Rush was embarrassed. He had nothing to do with it. And so at the end of the meal, he said, "Let me get the check. Let me check." I said, "No, we got it covered. You're our guest here." And so the owner and I took care of it. So fast forward a few months later when he had his television show, we chartered a jet to take an audience up to New York to see his TV show. At that time, Rush Limbaugh was the spokesperson for Ruth Chris Steakhouse. And on his television show, the owner of the restaurant who had hosted this dinner for him was there. And he said, "I want Ed and Nina Hendy to stand up in the audience. I want you to know they have the best steak place in America." Now, that's the kind of guy he was. I'm sure it didn't make the Ruth Chris sponsors happy, but he knew that guy had picked up a big tab for him that night. He knew that guy had, his restaurant had been kind of turned upside down by nothing that Rush did, and that's the kind of guy he was. He wanted to do right by people, and a great guy. I have nothing at all bad to say about him. Nothing. I can't think of anything. He just loved this country, loved the Constitution, loved his listeners. He pinched himself for his success. Chad, look, you've been doing this for a while. You know how hard it is. And when he left that job as a Kansas City Royal promotion guy, basically, throwing balls into the stands, he went to Sacramento. He wanted to be a talk show host. He was on there, and a guy named Ed McLaughlin, who worked for ABC Radio, was scouring the country to find a talk show host to do this big show that Ed had this vision for. And he went and listened to Rush and passed on him. He passed on him the first time, and he still couldn't find anybody. So about 4 months later, he came back around, listened to Rush again, and on the second time, he said, this guy's gotten a lot better in the last 4 months. I'm going to give him a shot. And he flew him to New York, and they put him on the radio, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Wow. Smart guy. Now, let me ask you this. I have to ask. You said that Rush Limbaugh sent you a tape. You still have the tape somewhere?
Man, I wish I did.
Wouldn't that be great?
I wish I did. But and back then, think about this, Chad, and I'm sure some of your listeners remember back then. I mean, it's a long time ago, but if they've been listening to radio since Rush came on, he was considered, like controversial back then. This wild guy, and how can he say these things? And today, and I would say for the last 20 years, 25 years, he's really been mainstream conservative. I mean, everything he talked about. I mean, the conservative movement today, the Tea Party movement today, all the conservatives across the country, Donald Trump's success to become president. Rush is the guy who built that foundation. There was no conservative movement before him. There was no one on radio talking about that. And then, of course, a lot of copycats came along. Some of them were good, some of them weren't so good. And he built that. AM radio was dying.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, that's why the station I bought in Tomball went broke. It's why I probably would have gone broke, except for Rush Limbaugh. It was dying on the vine, and he came in and just, he's an original. There's no one who will ever be like him or can ever try to be like him.
Yeah.
I'll miss hearing that theme music. I can hear it in my head. I just miss hearing his voice, and he and I are the same age, so it really hits me kind of hard. It's a
tough day.
Tough day.
Yeah.
Tough day. Great guy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great guy. Did you ever have a chance to meet him, Chad? Anywhere?
And it's one thing I wish I had, and I never had a chance to. And it's disappointing that I never had a chance to. But like so many others, you felt like just listening to him as long as I did, you felt like you had met him. And I wish I had. Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
I was going to give you two quick stories. So when he came to Houston the first time I said, "Where do you want to go to eat?" He said, "I've heard about chicken fried steak, and I've never had one." We had it 3 times that week, and I remember when we got in the limousine to take him to the airport after the Republican convention in '92, I guess it was. And I said, "So
we've got to get going, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You know the clock. We got to get going. Thank you.
Go.